At Thanksgiving in the house my husband built with his own 2 hands, my daughter stood up and said, "Mom, you can eat in the kitchen. The real family sits here." 16 people heard her. Not one of them said a word. So I set down my plate. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I walked out the front door of my own home, got in my car, and drove away while the gravy was still warm. 3 hours later, my phone lit up. It was her husband, and his voice was shaking. "Please come back," he said. The lawyer just called about the house. I poured myself a cup of coffee. I sat down at my own kitchen table and I waited because whatever the lawyer had just told them I already knew. I'd been the one who picked up the phone first. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories, where the woman they send to the kitchen is usually the one holding the keys to the whole house. Stay with me to the end of this one. You'll want to drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. My name is Marian Sawyer. I'm 70 years old and I have spent 44 Thanksgivings in the same house on Maple Street. My husband Raymond built that house, not bought built. He framed it in the summer of 1979 with his brother and a case of beer in a borrowed level. And he carried me over the threshold before the kitchen even had a floor. We raised our daughter in it. We buried a lot of years of joy and trouble into those walls. Raymond passed 6 years ago in the back bedroom on a quiet morning in March. And I kept the house exactly as a place keeps the people it has loved. I am not, I'll admit, an impressive woman to look at. I kept the books for a plumbing supply company for 31 years. I wear cardigans. I drive an old Buick. I say thank you to the cashier, and I mean it. People look at a woman like me, and they fill in the rest. Sweet, simple past her usefulness. My daughter started filling it in years ago, and I let her because correcting people is exhausting, and I had other things to do. But here is something 31 years of bookkeeping teaches you. The quietest line on the page is usually the one that decides everything. People skip right over it. They look at the big flashy numbers and they miss the small entry at the bottom that the whole thing actually rests on. I'd become in my own family that quiet line at the bottom of the page. They were about to find out what it was holding up. My daughter is named Vanessa. She's 42 and she has spent the last decade climbing. I don't say that, Cree. Climbing is in our blood. Raymond and I climbed our whole lives just up a shorter ladder. But Vanessa married into the Cole family, and the Coles have money that came from somewhere far enough back that they've forgotten it ever had to be earned. Her mother-in-law Lorraine wears it like a temperature she keeps the room at. And Vanessa decided somewhere along the way that to belong up there, she had to leave down here behind. Down here being me. The cardigans. The Buick, the plumbing supply books. She started correcting me at dinners. "Mom, it's not supper. It's dinner." She started introducing me with a little apologetic laugh. "This is my mother. She's very old-fashioned. When I'd offer to bring my green bean casserole to a gathering, she'd say the caterer had it handled in a voice that meant, 'Please don't.' I let it go. That's what mothers of climbers learn to do. You tell yourself she's just finding her footing up there, and the day she's secure, she'll reach back down for you. I told myself that for 10 years. What I didn't tell her, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I had already decided to reach up to her in the biggest way I had left to give. I was going to hand her the one thing Raymond and I had that was worth anything at all. I just hadn't done it yet. Thank God, as it turned out, I hadn't quite done it yet. You have to understand what the Maple Street house is to this family because everything that happened turns on it. It's where everyone comes. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every Christmas and graduation party for 44 years. My sisters come. The cousins come, Vanessa and Derek, and my grandson come. The house has a long oak table Raymond built to match the floors, and it has fed this family through every season we've had. Here is the thing people had quietly forgotten. The house is mine. Just mine. Raymond left it to me free and clear. No mortgage, no liens paid off the year he retired. My name alone on the deed. But because I host, because I'm in the kitchen before dawn with the turkey, and I'm the last one washing pans at midnight, the house had stopped feeling like mine to everyone but me. It had become the family house, a sort of public utility that I happened to maintain. Vanessa had started talking about it like weather, something that simply existed and would always be there for her. "When we have the house someday," she'd say to Derek, not lowering her voice. "The first thing we're doing is opening up this kitchen someday," as if it were already written, as if I were a formality between her and a renovation. She wasn't entirely wrong to assume it would come to her. That's the part that still aches because she was my only child, and of course, the house was going to be hers. I was in fact about 3 weeks from giving it to her outright. She just didn't know that yet. And she was about to do the one thing that would make me change my mind. Here's what nobody at that table knew. That fall, I'd made up my mind. The house was too big for one widow. My niece didn't love the stairs anymore. And I wanted, while I was still alive, to enjoy watching it, to give Vanessa and Derek the gift Raymond and I had always dreamed of giving the family home free and clear to raise my grandson in. So I'd gone to see Harold Beck, the attorney who'd handled Raymond's affairs for 30 years. We'd drawn up a transfer on death deed with Vanessa and Derek as the beneficiaries. And more than that, I decided to move out early. I'd quietly put a deposit on a little one-bedroom condo across town, the kind of place with no stairs and a coffee shop on the corner. The plan was to hand them the keys on Christmas morning to watch my daughter's face. I'd even bought the paper for it, a heavy cream envelope, the good kind, sitting in my desk drawer with the deed copy and a note in my own hand for Vanessa and Derek and Caleb. "Your father built this for a family. Fill it with one. Love, Mom." Raymond's old house key was tucked inside on the worn leather fob he'd carried for 40 years. Derek knew a piece of it. I'd had to loop him in. There were logistics, a moving date, the condo deposit, and Derek, whatever his faults, is the practical one. I'd sworn him to secrecy. "Let me surprise her," I'd said. He'd agreed. I tell you all this so you understand. I wasn't a bitter old woman looking for an excuse. I was 3 weeks and one envelope away from giving my daughter everything, and then she sent me to the kitchen. I want to be fair to Vanessa because the easy version of this story makes her a monster, and she isn't one. She's something more ordinary and more sad than that. When Vanessa married Derek, she walked into a family that measures people. The Coles are polite about it. They'd never say a cruel word. But they have a way of asking where you summered and what your father did that lets you know precisely where you've been filed. The first time I met Lorraine Derek's mother, she looked at my shoes for exactly 1 second too long, smiled and asked if I'd had far to travel. I'd driven 20 minutes. Vanessa felt all of that. And instead of letting it roll off, she decided to win it. She would out-Cole the Coles. She would have the right house, the right kitchen, the right mother. And since she couldn't trade me in, she'd do the next best thing and quietly tuck me out of frame. It came from a wound. I know that a girl who grew up in a plumbing supply family and got looked at like that spends the rest of her life terrified of being found out as common. And the cruel trick of it is that the person who reminds her most of where she came from is the person who loves her most, me. Understanding all of that is why I stayed quiet for so long. It turns out, why I'd stay quiet forever. Because there's a line between a daughter managing her insecurities and a daughter humiliating her mother at the head of a table full of witnesses. For 10 years, Vanessa stayed on one side of that line. At Thanksgiving, she stepped clean over it. There was one person in that family who never made me feel like furniture. My grandson, Caleb. Caleb is 17. He's all elbows and earnest opinions. The kind of boy who still hugs his grandmother in front of his friends and doesn't seem to know he's supposed to be embarrassed by it. He comes to my house on Sundays, sometimes just him, and we do the crossword and he tells me about the girl he can't work up the nerve to talk to. He's the only one who ever asks about Raymond. "Tell me the one about Grandpa and the canoe," he'll say, even though he's heard it 40 times. He likes that I keep his grandfather's reading glasses in the drawer by the good chair. He's the only one in that family, frankly, who I look at and see Raymond looking back. When I planned to give the house away, Caleb was the whole reason it felt right. "Your father built this for a family." I'd written "fill it with one." I pictured Caleb growing up in those rooms, his kids someday running on the floors Raymond laid. I tell you about Caleb now because you need to know he was at that table on Thanksgiving, 17 years old, in a button-down his mother made him wear, sitting near the head of the table with the real family. Remember that when we get there, remember that of all the people in that warm, full, ungrateful room, exactly one of them was about to do the decent thing. And remember that I was watching. The week of Thanksgiving, I was happier than I'd been in years. I had a secret, and it was a good one. Every time Vanessa was short with me on the phone, and she was short with me a lot that week, stressed about the coals coming, about the table settings, about whether her caterer's gravy was elevated enough, I just smiled and thought about Christmas morning, about the cream envelope in my drawer, about handing her Raymond's old key and watching 10 years of distance fall off her face. I thought the gift would fix it. I really did. I thought when she understood what I was giving her, she'd remember who I was. That was my mistake, and I'll own it. I thought generosity could buy back respect that was never really gone. That was just buried. I've since learned you can't. Respect isn't something you can hand someone in an envelope. They either carry it for you or they don't. And you find out which on the days it costs them something. I found out on a Thursday in November with my husband's turkey platter in my hands. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you to that table. I want you to see it the way I saw it, so that when my daughter says the words, you understand exactly what she threw away. It was going to be the best Thanksgiving in years. I'd made sure of it. The trouble started small the way it always does. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Vanessa came by the house not to see me, it turned out, but to take some measurements. She walked through my rooms with her phone out, photographing, murmuring to herself. This wall could come down. The cabinets are obviously the first thing to go. Planning a project, I asked from the doorway of my own kitchen. Just dreaming, she said, not looking up. You know, for when the time comes. For when the time comes. She said it lightly, the way you'd talk about a season changing. She was standing in my kitchen, the kitchen Raymond built, mentally demolishing it, and she didn't think she needed to lower her voice because in her mind it was already hers. I was just the current occupant. A tenant on a short lease that nature would shortly terminate. I should have said something then. I want you to know I considered it. But I had that cream envelope in my drawer not 10 feet away, and I thought, let her dream. In a month, she'll know it's real. Let her have this. So I made her a cup of tea, and I let my daughter photograph my home for the renovation she was already planning. And I felt underneath my happiness the first cold thread of something I didn't have a name for yet. It wasn't that she wanted the house. I wanted her to have it. It was the way she wanted it. Like it was owed, like I was a formality. Like the only thing standing between her and her future was an old woman who hadn't had the courtesy to get out of the way yet. I told myself I was imagining it. Then I found the folder. It was an accident the way the worst discoveries usually are. Caleb had left his tablet at my house that Sunday, and Vanessa asked me to email her a document off it. A permission slip for some school trip. I'm not as helpless with these things as my family believes. I opened the tablet to find the file, and a shared family folder was sitting right there on the screen, synced from Vanessa's account. I shouldn't have looked. I looked. There was a design board. Dozens of images, gutted kitchen's white marble, a wall of glass where Raymond's bookshelves stood. The folder was labeled Maple Reno. There was a contractor's preliminary quote dated 3 weeks earlier, $41,000 for Phase 1. And there was a text thread screenshotted into the folder like a trophy. Vanessa to a friend. Once we're in the Maple house, we'll finally have room to entertain properly. Mom's moving to some little condo, which honestly is for the best. She rattles around in that big place. Mom's moving to some little condo. She knew somehow. I realized Derek must have let it slip, or she'd pieced it together. She knew about the gift. She knew the house was coming to her. And instead of gratitude, instead of even surprise, she'd skipped straight to the renovation, the entertaining, the relief of finally getting me tucked away in some little condo. The gift wasn't a gift to her. It was an inheritance she was impatient to collect. I was a delay. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time with that tablet. The way you sit when a doctor has just said a word you weren't ready for. I didn't cry. I just got very, very quiet, and somewhere underneath the quiet, for the first time, a small voice asked, Marion, are you sure you want to give it to her? I told the voice to hush. There was a turkey to brine. I spent the next few days talking myself out of what I'd seen. She's excited, I told myself. Young people are tactless when they're excited. The little condo comment was thoughtless, not cruel. She doesn't know I saw it, and the gift isn't about her gratitude anyway. It's about Caleb, about Raymond's wish, about doing the generous thing because it's right, not because it's repaid. All of that was true. I'm good at finding the true thing that lets me keep loving someone. Mothers usually are. But there's a difference between forgiving a person and not seeing them clearly. And I'd been confusing the two for a decade. I forgave Vanessa the way you'd forgive weather by deciding it wasn't personal. And in doing that, I'd stopped requiring her to be decent to me. I'd made my own respect optional and then acted surprised when she treated it as optional too. I decided to go ahead with the gift anyway. I want you to know that even after the folder, even after some little condo I was still going to give my daughter that house, I'd resolved to set the hurt aside, hand her the envelope at Christmas, and trust that having the thing would soften her toward the woman who gave it. That was where my head was on Thanksgiving morning, wounded but resolved. Generous to a fault, Raymond used to say, and he didn't always mean it as a compliment. I pulled the turkey out at dawn. I set it on Raymond's platter, the big oak one he'd carved by hand the first winter in the house with a turkey and a sheath of wheat worked into the rim. I'd served every Thanksgiving on that platter for 44 years. I had no idea it would be the last one I'd serve in that house. The morning was beautiful. I'll give it that. I was up at 5 the way I always am on Thanksgiving. Moving through the dark kitchen by feel, there's a particular peace to it. The house quiet, the oven warming the smell of sage and butter. 44 years of the same morning, layered one on top of the next like coats of paint. I could feel Raymond in it. I always can on Thanksgiving. He'd come down in his robe and steal a piece of skin off the bird, and I'd swat his hand and he'd kiss my temple and call me his girl. I talked to him a little the way widows do. Big day rye, I said, sliding the turkey in. We're giving them the house. Can you believe it? I set out his platter on the counter to warm, ran my thumb over the wheat he'd carved into the rim. I thought about how pleased he'd be. He loved nothing more than giving things to people. He'd have wrapped the whole house in a bow if he could have. By noon, the food was a small miracle, and the house smelled like every good memory I had. I put on my nice blouse, the blue one. I set the long oak table for 16 with the good china. Raymond's platter at the center where it always went. I stood back and looked at it. My husband's table, my husband's house, my husband's platter, all of it laid out to feed the people we'd made and loved. It was, I thought, perfect. The last perfect hour I'd have in that house. Then the doorbell rang and the Coles came in on a draft of cold air and expensive perfume, and the afternoon began to turn. Lorraine Cole arrived like she was inspecting a property. She came in first in camel cashmere, and she did the thing she always does, a slow, smiling sweep of the room pricing it. What a cozy little house, she said, which is what Lorraine says instead of small. So much character. You don't see this kind of older construction much anymore. My husband built it, I said. Did he? She said in the tone you'd use for a clever child. How resourceful. Derek came in behind her, kissed my cheek, and had the grace to look slightly ashamed, the way he often did around his mother and me in the same room. He caught my eye and there was a flicker. He knew about the gift. Knew this was meant to be their last Thanksgiving as guests here before it became theirs. I think part of him wanted to say something kind. He didn't. Derek's whole life is a study in the kind thing he doesn't quite say. Then Vanessa swept in already in hostess mode, already rearranging. Mom, you didn't use the gold chargers. Oh, well. She moved my centerpiece. She moved Raymond's platter 6 inches and frowned at it like it was clutter. This old thing. We should really get you a proper serving platter, Mom. That old thing is staying right there, I said pleasantly and moved it back. She gave me a look. The look that said, you're being difficult. And then the doorbell rang again, and the cousins arrived, and the house filled up with coats and casserole dishes and noise, and Vanessa swept off to play Lady of a Manor that wasn't yet technically hers. I stood in my own front hall and watched my family flow past me into my house like I was the help who'd held the door. It's a strange thing becoming a guest in your own home. It happens by inches, and each inch is too small to object to without seeming petty. Vanessa had taken over the kitchen. My kitchen, directing the caterer's 2 staff she'd hired just to make it special this year. When I went in to check my gravy, she steered me out by the elbow. Mom, relax. Let us handle it. Go sit. Go sit. In my own house on Thanksgiving, the one day of the year that has always been mine to run. So I went and sat useless in the living room while strangers plated my food in my kitchen and my daughter played general. The Coles had brought their own energy and the room had reorganized around it. Conversations I wasn't in, references I didn't have. Lorraine holding court about her cruise. I tried twice to join, and both times the talk just sort of closed back over the spot where I'd spoken like water. Caleb found me, though. He came and sat next to me on the arm of the chair and showed me a photo of a robotics thing he'd built for school. And for 10 minutes I had my grandson, and I wasn't furniture. I was Grandma. It's wonderful, sweetheart, I told him, and meant it more than anything I'd say all day. You okay, Grandma? He asked quietly in that way kids have of seeing the thing the adults are all pretending not to. I'm just fine, baby, I said. I wasn't quite, but I still thought the worst of the day was a little loneliness. I still thought I'd hand them an envelope at Christmas and all of this would melt. Then Vanessa called everyone to the table. If you've ever sat at a table full of family and felt yourself becoming invisible, felt the conversation skip over, you felt yourself shrink to fit the small space they'd left you, then you already know the loneliest room in the world is a crowded one. If this is landing somewhere real for you, stay with me. There's a reason I'm telling you all of it. The table sat 16, and there were that year 17 of us. I counted the chairs while Vanessa was seating people, directing them like a wedding planner. Lorraine, you're here by me. Derek, head of the table. My husband's seat, but I let it go. Cousins down here. Caleb, you're up here with the grown-ups this year. And on, placing everyone until the long oak table Raymond built was full of bodies, and there was, I realized, no chair left with my name on it. It wasn't an accident. I knew Vanessa. She'd counted. She'd known there'd be one too many, and she'd decided in advance who the one would be. Lorraine, ever helpful, supplied the cover. Oh, is it tight, you know, she said, turning to me with a warm, terrible smile. Older folks are often more comfortable away from all the bustle. The kitchen's so much cozier, less noise for the nerves, as if I were 90 and fragile instead of 70 and standing in the house I owned. I opened my mouth to say what I don't know, that this was my house, that I'd set this table, that Raymond carved the platter they were about to eat off of. But before I could, my daughter stood up and she made it official. Actually, let me slow down because I don't want to rush past the moment just before the one I keep returning to. Before she said the words, Vanessa picked up her wine glass to make a toast. She was glowing. This was her afternoon. Her in-laws impressed her table beautiful, her caterer's gravy sufficiently elevated. She had the whole room's attention, and she lifted her glass and she said, I just want to say thank you to everyone who made this house a home, to family, to new traditions. She smiled at Lorraine. To the next chapter, for all of us, to everyone who made this house a home. I had made that house a home. Me and Raymond in 44 years of Thanksgivings, exactly like this one before she was born and every year since. I had been up since 5. The food she was about to praise was on the platter my husband carved, and in her toast to everyone who made this house a home. There was no room for the woman who actually had. I stood at the edge of the dining room, a plate in my hand because I'd been about to sit. And I felt something I'd never quite felt toward my daughter before. Not hurt. I was used to hurt. This was clarity, cold and clean and final. Like the moment the anesthesia lifts and you can suddenly see the whole room. I thought, she doesn't know who I am. She has genuinely forgotten. And on the heels of that thought came another quieter one that I would not fully understand until I was in my car. Then perhaps it's time I reminded her. Vanessa set down her glass. She looked at me standing there with my plate, and she said it. Mom, bright carrying, designed to be heard. You can eat in the kitchen. The real family sits here. The real family sits here. I want to describe the silence that followed because it told me everything. It wasn't a shocked silence. Nobody gasped. Nobody dropped a fork. 16 people heard my daughter tell her 70-year-old mother to go eat in the kitchen in that mother's own home. And the silence that followed was the silence of people deciding not to get involved. Lorraine examined her napkin. The cousins found their plates very interesting. Derek looked at the table. They weren't horrified. They were embarrassed. For me, a little the way you're embarrassed for someone who's wandered into the wrong room, but not one of them was going to risk Vanessa's afternoon to defend me. That silence hurt worse than the words. The words were one woman's cruelty. The silence was a verdict. 16 people quietly agreeing that yes, that was roughly where I belonged. I stood there with my plate, Raymond's plate, actually the everyday one with the chip he'd always meant to fix. And in that long, awful, telling silence, I understood with total clarity that I had spent 10 years buying my way back to a table where I was no longer wanted, and that the price had just gone up one humiliation too far. That's when the boy stood up. Caleb pushed his chair back so fast it nearly tipped. "Grandma can have my seat," he said. His voice cracked in the middle of it. The way a 17-year-old's does when he's frightened and doing the brave thing anyway. "I'll sit in the kitchen, or hear Grandma take mine." "I don't mind." He was already standing, already pulling his chair out for me. This gangly boy in the button-down his mother had made him wear. The only person at a table of 16 adults who'd looked at what was happening and known in his bones that it was wrong. For 1 second, I loved him so much I couldn't breathe. And then Vanessa killed it. Caleb's sharp, a mother's command, the kind that doesn't get argued with. "Sit down. Don't make this a thing. Don't make this a thing." As if her son's decency were the disruption. As if the problem in the room were the one person trying to fix it. Caleb froze half out of his chair, caught between his mother and his grandmother, and the whole weight of being 17 and powerless. He looked at me, stricken, asking with his eyes what to do. I couldn't let them turn his kindness into a battle he'd lose, so I gave him the only gift I had in that moment. I smiled at him a real smile just for him, and I said softly, "It's all right, sweetheart. Sit down. You're a good boy. The best one here." He sat slowly miserable, and I looked one last time at the table my husband built full of people eating off his platter who had just watched my daughter send me to the kitchen and decided it was fine. Then I made my decision. I did not raise my voice. I want you to understand that because the temptation must have been enormous and I don't actually remember feeling it. What I felt was that 4 a.m, calm Raymond used to say I had the stillness that came over me whenever a thing was finally completely clear. The same stillness I'd felt when the doctor told me about Raymond. When there was nothing left to decide, only to do. I looked at my daughter standing at the head of my husband's table in my house, and I felt the last 10 years rearrange themselves into a single simple fact. She did not respect me. She had never really respected me. And no envelope, no house, no gift on earth was going to buy what she decided years ago I wasn't worth. So I stopped trying to buy it. I set my plate down. Not slammed, set gently on the sideboard, the way you set down a thing you've decided you're finished carrying. The small everyday plate with Raymond's chip in it. "You're right, Vanessa," I said. The room went still in a different way now because something in my voice had changed, and even people not paying attention could feel it. "The real family sits there," I said, nodding at the table. "I'll get out of the way." And I turned and I walked out of the dining room through the front hall, past the coats, and out the door of the house my husband built into the cold, bright November afternoon. Without my coat, without a word more, leaving 16 people and a steaming turkey and 44 years behind me, I have never before or since felt so completely calm. I sat in my Buick in my own driveway for a moment, hands on the wheel, and I waited to fall apart. I didn't. I kept waiting for the tears, the shaking, the second-guessing. None of it came. What came instead was the strangest lightness, like setting down a suitcase you've carried so long you'd forgotten it had a weight. For 10 years, I'd been hauling around the work of being acceptable to my own daughter. And somewhere on the walk from the dining room to the car, I'd simply put it down. I started the engine. Through the front window, I could see them. The warm gold light, the full table. My family resuming their dinner. Nobody had come after me. Not Vanessa, not Derek, not the cousins. 16 people and not one had followed me into the cold to say, "Wait, this isn't right, come back." Only one face was turned toward the window watching me go. Caleb. He had his hand pressed flat against the glass. I lifted my own hand to him. Then I backed out of the driveway and drove away. I didn't go far. I drove to the little condo across town, the one I'd put a deposit on. The one that was supposed to be my downsizing surprise, the one Vanessa had called some little condo she was relieved to be rid of me into. I had a key already. I let myself in. The rooms were empty and clean and quiet and entirely mine. I stood in the middle of the bare living room of the rest of my life, and I made 2 decisions in order. The first was that I would not be giving my daughter that house. The second was that I needed to call Harold back. But first, before any phone call, I did the thing I always do when I need to think clearly. I made coffee. The condo's little kitchen had nothing in it yet but a kettle, a jar of instant, and a single mug I'd brought over weeks ago. I boiled the water. I made a cup. I sat down at the card table that was the only furniture in the place in the late gold light coming through bare windows, and I drank my coffee. And I let myself think. I thought about whether I was being rash. A woman makes a decision in the heat of an insult. She should hold it out to the light before she acts. So I held it up. Was I punishing my daughter for one bad moment? No. The moment was just the place where 10 years finally became visible. The folder, the little condo, the renovation quote, the toast, the kitchen, Caleb's chair, and don't make this a thing. It wasn't one cruelty. It was a pattern I'd been calling weather so I wouldn't have to feel it. Would Raymond want me to give her the house anyway? I sat with that one a long time because it was the only argument that could have stopped me. And I knew the way I knew his face what he'd say. Raymond built that house for a family. Fill it with one I'd written. And the people at that table today were not a family. They were a hierarchy with me at the bottom of it. But there had been one person, one boy halfway out of his chair. I finished my coffee. I rinsed the mug and set it in the empty sink. And I picked up the phone and called Harold back at home on Thanksgiving, and he answered on the second ring. Marion Harold said, surprised, "Happy Thanksgiving. Everything all right?" "No," I said, "but it's going to be. I need to change some things, Harold, and I'd like to start tonight if you'll let me." "Tell me." "The transfer on death deed, the one naming Vanessa and Derek." I kept my voice as level as a ledger line. "I want to revoke it." A pause. Harold had known me 30 years. He didn't ask if I was sure. He asked what I wanted instead. "Can it be done?" I said. "I always wondered if those were really as easy to change as you said." "They are," he said. "A transfer on death deed is revocable anytime you're alive, Marion, no matter what it says on its face. You can revoke it or record a new one naming someone else, and it overrides the old one. It's your house. It stays your house until the day you die and you decide where it goes. That's the whole point of them." "Then I want to revoke the one naming my daughter," I said, "and I want to record a new one. Naming." I looked out the bare window at the lights coming on across the town where my whole life had happened. My grandson. I said Caleb in a trust, so his parents can't touch it. Held until he's 25. The house goes to Caleb and to no one else. "And Harold?" My voice caught just once, then steadied. "I'm not moving anywhere yet. I'm keeping the house. I'll live in it. I just needed to know whose it is after me, and it isn't hers. I can have the revocation drafted tonight and the new deed ready Monday," Harold said gently. "Marion, are you all right? I will be," I said. "Do me one favor. When it's done, let Derek know. He's the practical one. He'll need to be the one to tell her." After I hung up with Harold, I sat in the dark a while. And I'll be honest with you about my heart because I don't want you thinking it had turned to stone. It hadn't. I grieved at that card table. Not for the house. I was keeping the house. I grieved for the Christmas morning I'd been picturing for months. The one where Vanessa opened the envelope and remembered who I was. That Christmas was gone now. I'd been carrying it like a held breath, and I had to let it out, and it hurt going. But here's what I want to say to you. If you've ever been the one who keeps giving and giving to someone who's decided you don't count, generosity is a beautiful thing. But generosity to a person who has no respect for you isn't love. It's a tax you've agreed to pay on their bad behavior, and it never ever buys what you're hoping it'll buy. You cannot purchase your way back into the heart of someone who's already decided where to file you. You can only stop paying. I just stopped paying. I made one more decision at that table, the practical kind. I wasn't going to sneak. I wasn't going to let Vanessa find out about the deed from a cold lawyer's letter, and then spin it to the family as her bitter old mother lashing out. The truth had been made public today at that table in front of 16 people, so the truth would be set right in public too. I would tell them, all of them, to their faces once calmly, and then I would go on with my life. I rinsed my coffee mug and I waited for the phone to ring because I knew it would. It rang at 7:40. 3 hours almost to the minute after I'd walked out. It was Derek. I let it ring twice while I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, my second of the night, and carried it to the card table and sat down before I answered. There's a power in not being in a hurry. I'd learned that keeping books for 31 years. The person who isn't rushing is the person who already knows how the numbers come out. Marion. Derek's voice was tight frightened, the practical man with the ground gone out from under him. Please, come back, please. I'm the lawyer just called. Harold Beck. He called about the house. A shaky breath. He said, you're revoking the deed that you're putting it in. Marion, is that true? Did you change the house? I took a sip of my coffee. It was good and hot. Hello, Derek, I said calmly. Yes, it's true. I could hear it behind him then. The party's still going or trying to. And under it, Vanessa's voice climbing, demanding to know who was on the phone, what was happening. What did the lawyer want? The afternoon she'd worked so hard to stage was coming apart in the background like a tent in a wind. Marion, please, Derek said. Just, can you come back? Can we talk about this tonight? No, I said, not tonight, but come to the house tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Bring Vanessa. I paused. And bring Caleb. I'd like Caleb there especially. And I hung up and I drank my coffee and I waited for morning. They called 4 more times that night. I didn't answer. It wasn't cruelty. I'd said what I had to say. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. And there was nothing to add by phone that wouldn't just become an argument I'd be having alone in an empty condo. So I turned the ringer off and I unrolled the sleeping bag I'd brought over for measuring days. And I slept on the floor of my new life better than I'd slept in a year. In the morning, I drove back to Maple Street. I want to describe how it felt to walk back through that front door because it's the whole point. The night before, I'd left as a woman they'd sent to the kitchen. I came back as the woman who owned the floor they were all standing on. Same house, same me. The only thing that had changed was that the quiet line at the bottom of the page had finally been read aloud. They were waiting in the living room. Vanessa White and furious 10 years of careful composure gone. Derek gray and exhausted like he hadn't slept. Lorraine had stayed over, of course, and wasn't about to miss this. Perched on my sofa with her coffee like she was at the theater. And Caleb on the stairs, half in and half out, watching me with those Raymond eyes. The extended family had mostly gone home, but a few lingered. 2 of my sisters, a cousin drawn by the smell of a reckoning. Good. I'd wanted witnesses. The cruelty had been public. The correction would be too. I didn't sit. I stood in the center of my own living room in front of the fireplace Raymond built, and I waited until the room was quiet. Then I told them the truth. I want to tell you all something. I said that I was going to keep as a surprise until Christmas. Plans change. I took the cream envelope out of my purse. I'd brought it. I set it on the mantel where they could all see it. This house, I said, is mine. Just mine. Raymond left it to me. Paid off free and clear. My name alone is on the deed. I know everyone in this family had stopped thinking of it that way. Had started thinking of it as a sort of family heirloom I was babysitting. But legally and every other way that matters, it has been my house for 6 years. Vanessa opened her mouth. I lifted one hand gently and kept going. In that envelope, I said, is a deed and a key and a note in my own handwriting. Because this fall I decided I was going to give this house the whole thing free and clear to you, Vanessa, and to Derek as a gift. This Christmas, I'd put a deposit on a condo. I was going to move out and hand you the keys to your father's house and watch your face. My voice held steady. That was the surprise. That's what some little condo was. That's what I was doing while you planned the renovation. The room had gone completely silent. Vanessa's face was doing something complicated, the fury draining, something worse coming in behind it. You knew, didn't you? I said quietly. You'd figured out the house was coming to you. And knowing that, knowing I was about to give you everything, you still stood up at my table yesterday in this house and sent me to the kitchen because the real family sits there. I let that hang. So I made a phone call, I said. Mom Vanessa started, and her voice had gone high and thin. Mom, you can't. That was a joke. The kitchen thing. You're being dramatic. You can't just, I already have, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I found you almost never need to. If you actually have the thing you're talking about. I called Harold Beck last night and I revoked the deed that would have given you this house. I said, it's done. And this morning he's drawing up a new one. I looked at her and then deliberately I looked past her to the staircase to the boy sitting on the third step. You told me yesterday that the real family sits at that table, I said. And you were right, Vanessa. That's exactly the problem. Because of everyone at that table. 16 grown people who watched you send your grandmother to the kitchen, only one person stood up. I held out my hand toward him. Caleb, the only one who offered me his chair. The only one who's ever asked me about the man who built this house. Caleb's eyes were huge. So the house goes to Caleb, I said, in a trust held until he's 25 where his parents cannot touch it, mortgage it, or renovate it. Your father built this house for a family. I'm giving it to the one member of this family who acted like one. The sound Vanessa made, I will not forget. It wasn't grief. It was the sound of someone watching a thing they'd considered theirs vanish through their own fingers. You're punishing me, she breathed, over a seat. No, sweetheart, I said. I'm finally believing you. You've been telling me for 10 years that I'm not really part of your family. I just finally took you at your word. Lie. Then Vanessa came apart the way I'd somewhere known she would. Not an apology. People like Vanessa almost never apologize at the moment they're caught. They counterattack. Do you have any idea what you've done? Her voice was shaking, climbing. We gave notice on the rental, Mom. We told everyone. Derek and I have been planning. The contractor scheduled for January. We put down a deposit. We told the Coles we'd host Easter here. She turned to the room to Lorraine looking for an ally. She's doing this to humiliate me. After I've spent years after you've spent years, what I ask genuinely curious. She didn't have an end to the sentence, because the honest end was after I've spent years climbing away from you. And even Vanessa couldn't say that out loud in front of her son. And here is where the afternoon's true shape showed itself. Lorraine Grand Cashmere. Lorraine, who'd helpfully suggested the kitchen, stood up, smoothing her slacks, and said coolly, Well, this all sounds like a family matter. Vanessa, dear, we should go. And just like that, the moment things stopped being glamorous, the Coles began edging toward the door. The very people Vanessa had humiliated me to impress couldn't get away from her fast enough now that there was no house, no entertaining, no Easter. I watched my daughter understand it. The whole reason she'd sent me to the kitchen to belong to those people, and those people were already reaching for their coats. The notice on the rentals, not my doing, Vanessa, I said, not unkindly. Neither is the contractor's deposit. You spent money on a house that was never promised to you in writing because you assumed an old woman would simply hand it over and disappear. That assumption was the mistake, not my phone call. When the room had thinned, the Coles gone, the cousins suddenly remembering somewhere to be. It was just us, the family that was left when the audience went home, Vanessa crying on the sofa. Derek standing helpless by the window. Caleb still on the stairs who hadn't said a word. Here's how it's going to be, I said, and I kept my voice gentle now because the hard part was done and I'm not a cruel woman. I'm keeping this house and I'm living in it. When I die, it goes to Caleb. That's settled and it isn't changing. So please don't waste your energy. Derek nodded numbly. Vanessa wouldn't look at me. And I'm still your mother, Vanessa, I said. That doesn't change either. I will love you till the day I die, but I am done being the seat you assign and reassign depending on who's watching. I am done being sent to the kitchen in the house. I built a family in. I will come to your gatherings when I'm invited as your mother. Not as an inconvenience you tuck away so the Coles don't see where you came from. I picked up the cream envelope from the mantel. You don't get the version of me that buys your respect anymore. That woman left out the front door yesterday, and she isn't coming back. I crossed the room to the staircase, and I sat down next to my grandson, who was crying too quietly. The good boy. You stood up. I told him, when it cost you, you stood up. Don't ever stop doing that, Caleb. It's the whole thing. It's the entire ball game. He put his head on my shoulder, and for the first time in 2 days, I felt completely at home. Here's how it shook out in the weeks after. Because I know you want the ledger and not just the feeling. The renovation never happened. Obviously, the contractor kept the deposit. The rental they'd given notice on was already promised to someone else. So Vanessa and Derek spent a frantic month finding a new place and a good deal less house than they'd planned because it turned out their lifestyle had been leaning on an inheritance that was never actually theirs. A slow truth, but a clarifying one. The coals cooled considerably. There was no grand Maple Street to host Easter in, no impressive address to fold Vanessa into the family with. And Lorraine, I'm told, found other things to do. Vanessa learned the hard way that people who will only have you for your house were never really going to have you at all. I could have told her that. I'd learned it from the other side of the same lesson the day before at my own table. I won't pretend the whole thing didn't cost me. I lost the easy fiction of a close family. Thanksgiving, the next year, was smaller and stranger and quieter, but it was honest and honest. Turned out to be something I could actually live inside, which the old arrangement never had been. And the house stayed mine. I'm in it right now telling you this. Raymond's platter is back in the center of the table where it belongs. His key is back on its hook by the door. The cream envelope, though I kept that. I gave it to Caleb finally, but not at Christmas and not the way I'd planned. Derek came to see me alone about a month later. He sat at my kitchen table, my real kitchen, the one I'd been sent to, which I found a little funny and didn't say so, and he turned his hat in his hands. I should have stood up, he said finally at the table. When she said it, I knew it was wrong. I knew about the gift, I knew what you were planning, and I sat there. I've been sitting there my whole marriage, Marion not making it a thing. He looked up. Caleb's braver than me. He's 17 and he's braver than me. It was the truest thing Derek had ever said to me, and I didn't punish him for it. You can start standing up anytime you decide to. I told him, it's never too late to become the kind of man your son already is. He nodded. He's been better since not transformed. People don't transform, but trying. He brings Caleb by on Sundays now. Vanessa and I are slower. She's never quite apologized. She's the kind that finds it almost physically impossible. But she came to dinner last month and she sat at the table. And when I got up to clear, she said quietly, not quite meeting my eye, I'll do it, Mom. Sit. You sit. It isn't everything but a woman who once sent me to the kitchen telling me to sit while she cleared the plates. I'll take it. It's a start. It's her standing up an inch at a time. I gave Caleb the envelope on his 18th birthday. Not the house. He won't have that till he's 25 until I'm gone. And I intend to make him wait a good long while for the second part. But the envelope, the deed copy, the note in my hand, and Raymond's old key on its worn leather fob. This was going to be a Christmas present for your mom and dad, I told him. It's yours now. The key doesn't open anything you can't already walk into. You're always welcome here. You know that. But I wanted you to have your grandfather's key. He carried it 40 years. He'd have liked you to have it. Caleb held that key like it was made of something rarer than brass. Then he hugged me, this not so gangly anymore boy, and he said, I'll take care of it, Grandma. The house, all of it, I promise. I know you will, baby. I said, you already proved it. You proved it for the price of one chair. He didn't know what I meant. Not all of it. Someday he will. Someday when he's older, somebody will try to make him feel small, and he'll remember that the smallest, most ordinary act of decency, standing up, offering your chair, refusing to look away, turned out in his grandmother's life to be worth an entire house. That's the part I hope he keeps, not the house, the standing up. It's quiet here now on Maple Street, quieter than it used to be. I won't pretend I don't sometimes miss the loud, crowded, dishonest version of my family. The way you miss a warm room even after you find out the door was locked from the outside. But I sleep well. I have my husband's house, his table, his platter, his key on the hook. I have a grandson who calls on Sundays and a son-in-law learning to stand up and a daughter who slowly, an inch at a time, is finding her way back to a mother she'd written off. And I have my mornings. I get up early the way I always have. And I make a pot of coffee in the kitchen Raymond built. The kitchen they tried to send me to as if it were a punishment when it's the warmest room in the house and always has been. I take my cup to the table, and I sit in the gold light, and I drink it slow. If there's one thing I'd hand you from all of this, it's this. Your worth is not a chair other people assign you. Generosity to those who scorn you isn't love. It's a bill you've agreed to pay. Set it down. Keep your own keys, and never, ever let anyone send you to the kitchen in a house your love built. That's the whole of it. The platter's in the center of the table, the keys on its hook. And on the first cold morning of every November, I make the turkey on Raymond's oak platter, set it in the middle of the table he built, and I sit at the head of it. Not because I'm fighting anyone for the seat, but because it was always mine and I'd simply forgotten for a while to take it. It took my daughter sending me to the kitchen to remind me where I actually belonged. I suppose I owe her that much. The rest I'm keeping. That's my story. One Thanksgiving, one empty chair, and a phone call I made before they ever did. If it reminded you of a seat you've let someone take from you, take it back today. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.